Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are tonight's entertainment.
All right. This is our very first podcast of Podcasting Them Softly. Nick and I met through Paul Rollins on Facebook, who has this awesome movie website, Money and Delight, and makes comments all the time on Facebook. And I think it was, what was it, a Terrence Malick thing?
Well, I actually got a chance to meet Paul through the mutual love over on Miami Vice. So that's what led me from Paul, and then I think you and I sort of bonded over some Terrence Malick, and then clearly the film that has given this lovely podcast, its name.
Yeah, Killing Them Softly. Because if we would have both been on Tinder and our profile pictures would have been Killing Them Softly, we would have swiped right and it would have been a match. Maybe Grindr's more appropriate.
I'm still learning about all of these Tinders and Grinders and all of these different social media apps. So I'm a newbie with all of this fun stuff.
Aren't you just so glad that you met me?
Absolutely.
Now you're just enlightened on everything. But yeah, so essentially that's what it was. And I think I met Paul through the Criterion Collection's Facebook page. I'm not too sure. I think that's how we friended each other. There's this whole group of people that we're both friends with.
Yes.
On Facebook, and I'm not sure how exactly it started.
I will say I was initially resistant to the Facebook of anything, the Facebooking of anything, but I slowly realized that if you're a real serious movie buff, and if you really, really, really enjoy making film conversation a part of your everyday, landscape, there really hasn't been anything better, than it. It's like I've been turned on to movies that I've never even heard of by people from, as far away as Japan to Iran to Ireland to Texas. I mean, it's just, the list goes on and on. So I think it's just unbelievable. I've said before, and I'll say it again, for me, Facebook is a tool to discuss film and to share pictures of cats. And I'm very happy that I've been able to do such a thing.
No, I mean, I'm with you. The thing that's kept me from, deactivating a Facebook account is, the fact that, I just use it as, a medium to, just share movie posters or, pictures and quotes. And, when I think you sent me a friend request, which is really cute because I don't friend request people. But it was your, posts of, little mini, reviews and stuff that was just all right. Because I used to, film blog, and I know you used to, too.
Yep.
And you just kind of, reignited, the passion of, me wanting to do that and stuff like that. Because there's probably a handful of people that I'm friends with that genuinely enjoy, my insight on movies. And then there's, the other handful that I'm just friends with, that I've been friends with, that it's just okay.
Exactly.
But anyway, I'll digress from that. But, so you introduce yourself.
Absolutely. I'll give a little background.
Co-host and co-founder of Podcasting Them Softly.
Well, for everybody, my name is Nick Clement, and I grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut. I currently reside in Connecticut now. I did have a chance about 15 years ago to have multiple experiences out in Los Angeles doing different movie stuff, and had a chance to work at, Jerry Bruckheimer Films, and did some stuff for Tony and Ridley Scott and, those guys. And it was pretty crazy, and it was a, great place to kill your 20s, Los Angeles, lots of fun. And when I realized that I didn't really want to have every single movie spoiled for me before I got to the theater, and I didn't really care how the movies got made, I realized that I did not need to necessarily live in Los Angeles. So happy to be back on the East Coast, watching movies every day. My whole spiel is if I can get in at least one movie a day, I'm a pretty, happy person. So, movies have been something for, forever that just, captured my imagination and has always been able to take me to a place that I've never been. And that's what I always look for with movies. I want to see new stuff. I want to see things that are going to, expand my horizons. And I don't really necessarily just a blanket statement. I'm down for anything pretty much. There's really not too many films I'm not, going to check out if somebody tells me to or gives me a reason to think that there's quality or merit involved. So, it's just an overriding love of cinema, and it was really set firmly in place by my parents, my father especially, taking me to movies when I was young and really just showing me what people were capable of doing with a camera and telling stories. So that's my sort of personal intro, and I obviously just can't wait to get into any number of great movies, talk to you about them, and hopefully find out from more people out there about things I should see or you should see, and that we should discuss. So where does Frank hail from? What's his background?
That's exactly why I wanted you to do your intro first, because I didn't work for Bruckheimer or intern for Bruckheimer. I'm 30 and I live in Chicago, and I went to film school. I went to Columbia College of Chicago because I was going to be like the next, I think at that time it was like Quentin Tarantino or Scorsese or whoever. And I went to film school, and I would be sitting in class next to people wearing like a Boondock Saints t-shirt and stuff like that. And I was just like, I don't know about that. And through going, and from film school, it was awesome because I saw so many movies I never saw before. And then my focus kind of shifted to a more analytical standpoint. I took a class that was the study of the films of the 1970s, and that's my favorite class I've ever taken, and I'm friends with the instructor who taught that class on Facebook. But I just kind of didn't do anything with that, and now I'm underachieving in civil service, which is cool. but it's funny that after I got done with all that and I really started to read about Paul Thomas Anderson and Tarantino and all these filmmakers that I truly love, like Terrence Malick, and none of them went to film school. It's they went to California and just did it, and they just made a movie, and they just were writing scripts. So not that I'm trying to deter anybody from film school. I know you took film classes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I went to Keene State. Went to Keene State in New Hampshire and took film production, film studies. 2 years before the onslaught of digital filmmaking, I was doing, the 8mm and the 16mm with no sound and the black and white, and I had a lot of fun doing it. Doing those things, making little small films. But it was, when you go out to LA and you experience, that when you experience the Bruckheimer end of of Hollywood, where do you go when your first job is Jerry Bruckheimer? It's just, you could say what you want about the films overall, but, in terms of seeing success or seeing Hollywood at its peak, it was just it was probably too much too soon. But it was still an incredible experience. And like you say, I wouldn't deter anybody from going to, school and studying film. And, one of the best things about my college experience was becoming a fan of the Western. For instance, I was not a huge fan of the Western genre before I went to college. I took a class called The American Western. I fell in love with it. I realized how basically almost every movie that gets made nowadays is essentially a Western if you boil it down. It's one of the most versatile, areas of filmmaking, and, some of the greatest movies ever made have, come from the great era of, the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, those films. And, the wonderful thing about going to college and studying film is that people who, you're gonna get turned on to something that you least expected to get turned on in some of these great classes that these people will teach. So,
no, right on. I'm with you 100%. So essentially what we're going to do with our podcast is each week we'll have a film of the week, and then we'll do top 5 actor, actresses. And we probably could rotate screenwriters and directors and such in there, but we'll do top 5 of 2 people. And then, so you can go ahead and introduce our film of the week.
We're going to get into Andrew Dominik's Killing Them Softly. And before we get into the film itself, just give you a quick little rundown of Andrew Dominik. Not sure how many people are familiar with him and his work. He has only made, at the moment, 3 films. Chopper, with that great prison movie with Eric Bana when he exploded onto the Hollywood scene. It's an Australian film. I highly recommend people check it out. It would sit right in the same class as Bronson or Startup or any of these recent prison films where you have an intensely focused lead performance from an actor. After making a very tight sort of intimate film set in sort of a one location realm in that prison. He opened his filmmaking into the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, which for me, just an absolute masterpiece of filmmaking and just one of my favorite Westerns. And, just took a cue from Terrence Malick with that one. And, that's a film we could probably discuss in another podcast, but his third film, most recent film, was Killing Them Softly, 2012, a movie that when it came out certainly was met with, I would say, warm critical embrace for the most part. It had its, big supporters. It had some people that, probably didn't love it. I think that what's so unique about the movie, just to start off, is literally just right from the opening. This is a movie, essentially it's a study of lowlives. It's a study of degenerates. On the face of it, you have Brad Pitt, leading charge, if you will. He's the biggest name in the cast, if you will. But it is so far from a pretty boy Brad Pitt movie, and that's one of the things I've loved about him as an actor of late, with roles like in The Counselor, and in Killing Them Softly, and in a very emotionally complex role like in The Tree of Life, where he's sort of, shedding that image of, the poster boy, and, he's sort of, dipping into his talents as an actor, which I think have long been there, but just never really exploited. And what I love so much about Killing Them Softly is that it's about these evil people. It's just, there's no relenting from it. And it's just such a down and dirty film. You feel gross while watching it. You got these great performances from such a great cast. Ben Mendelsohn, who I just absolutely love, and Scoot McNairy. They're just these two hapless losers that just are in so far over their head, and they have no way of, getting out. And the thing I just love so much is right at the very beginning, Dominik starts to toy with the audience with the sound right at the start. And one of the things I liked so much about the film is that it constantly felt, even though that it's a low stakes, quote unquote film, it's about, a couple of people within this small realm. Dominik keeps things so interesting on a filmmaking level with the sound, with his imagery, with his use of cinematography. And for me, the visual aspect of filmmaking, that's what really gets me excited. So I guess I'll sort of, maybe let you take over from here, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about some of those things that he did, that impressed you so much, maybe with the technical side, because I know that you're going to want to get into your dissection of the film in a way that I never actually thought about it. So,
right. I mean, I just,
what impressed you the most when you watched the film on a formal level?
I just remember hearing about the movie come out, because I'm on IMDb all the time, and I'm always looking at actors I like and future projects. And I just remember seeing this movie called Killing Them Softly, which was it called Coogan's Trade, the title of the book? Was it originally called that before it got called Killing Them Softly? I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure, Coogan's Trade, or something like that, or Coogan's Trade. It's based on a book.
Right, and I just remember seeing that this movie is headlined by Brad Pitt, had Richard Jenkins in it, had James Gandolfini, had Sam Shepard, had who am I missing? Ray Liotta, and I was just oh my god, and of course it's a mob movie, and I was just and then the trailer came out, and I was just this movie just looks absolutely fucking incredible. It's got Johnny Cash music in it, and it's all slow motion, and it's really dark and it's gritty, and then I remember when it came out at Cannes, and everybody talked about how this movie's a metaphor for the economic meltdown and collapse of 2008, and I was just this movie sounds too good to be true. It just sounded so awesome. And then I saw it in theaters with my buddy Peyton, who I go see movies with all the time, and he loves Brad Pitt, and I like Brad Pitt, but not as much as he does. But now I love Brad Pitt because of the movies you spoke about, and then I love Babel, and I love Inglourious Bastards, and everything he's done in the past 10 years.
Yeah, the guy is it's just
he's just become Paul Newman in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul Newman, Robert Redford, he's long been on that track, and it's just just look at the films, look at the quality of the filmmakers, look at the taste and material. You know, if there's a handful of actors that I constantly will always say I want to see everything that they do, his name is always there, and this was really no exception. So,
all right, for those who haven't seen the film Killing Them Softly, essentially what it's about is it's set in 2008 in Boston, and it's two guys that knock off a card game that's run by Ray Liotta, and it's the perfect crime because years ago, Ray Liotta's card game got knocked over. It's a mob-run card game. And Ray Liotta's card game got knocked over, and as it turned out, Ray Liotta was the one that knocked off his own card game. So when these two guys get sent there to knock off the card game, it's the perfect crime because everybody's going to think that, like, Ray Liotta did it again. And the reason Ray Liotta never got any repercussions from it is because he's such a likable character in the movie, which is another reason why I love this. It's like Ray Liotta plays the victim, because he always plays like that insane asshole. Aside from, like, Goodfellas, but, like, he's just always, like, out of control.
yes,
And I don't know how many times throughout the film, like...
it's a brilliant stroke of casting. It's a brilliant
Right,
stroke of casting to make you care about Ray Liotta in the gangster genre after Ray Liotta has come to mean what he means.
Exactly, and I don't know how many times it's said in the movie, but, like, everybody loves Marky. And it's awesome because, like, everybody loves Marky. So essentially what happens is his card game gets knocked over, and Richard Jenkins plays, like, this mob liaison that calls in Brad Pitt, who's, like, this just super badass. Like, Brad Pitt's entrance into the movie is him driving in his car, and he's smoking a cigarette, and he's got sunglasses, and his hair's slicked back, and Johnny Cash's When the Man Comes Around is playing. And it's like as soon as Brad Pitt comes into this movie, at probably like the 15 or 20-minute mark, maybe even a little later.
I think it's almost 25 minutes before the quote-unquote star shows up. And it couldn't be any more of a badass entrance to it that you just there are few movies that have a more badass character introduction than that one.
Right, and as soon as you see Brad Pitt come on screen with that Johnny Cash song playing, it's like, you know, shit hit the fan, and, like, people are going down. So essentially what happens is Brad Pitt meets with Richard Jenkins, and Richard Jenkins is himself in a way in this film. He's, like, super likable and affable.
Very
and
fun.
he's just like, he's just the nice guy. And he brings in Brad Pitt to, like, fix this problem. And Brad Pitt wants to take it in a direction that Richard Jenkins doesn't feel comfortable, and he's not sure how people are going to feel about it and the kind of, like, societal impact it'll have on, like, the society of the film. So essentially, you know, Brad Pitt convinces Richard Jenkins to take it in his direction, and Brad Pitt's like, I got to call in Mickey, because if we're going to take out two guys, I need help. And James Gandolfini plays Mickey, and he's briefly in the film, and he's only in 2 scenes. But, I mean, this film is filled with incredible actors that I love, and even character actors. And each actor is at, like, a 10 out of 10 in this film.
They
like,
all
they
are.
just bring it. And then comes James Gandolfini, who, to me, is just the standout of this film. I mean, he is just this scuzzy New York mob hitman that comes to Boston as a favor for Brad Pitt. And as soon as you see him come off the plane, and I love how it's edited, where it's just like down like the corridor from the airplane, and it's just
kind of
he just fades in.
Yeah, the visual is kind of visual has a smeary quality to it, which I love because he's all haggard and tired and laid over. It's just, you know, you're absolutely right. Gandolfini comes in and basically provides an acting clinic over, you know, 2 or 3 scenes. And
without a doubt.
It's wonderful. And for him to have known, and for Andrew Dominik to have known well enough to cast, quote unquote, Tony Soprano, a man that, okay, you're going to watch a crime film and you're going to put Gandolfini in it. At this point, everybody associates Gandolfini with The Sopranos. So you bring, and you know what kind of man he was in The Sopranos. And then you bring him in and have him play this role in the same milieu. And he does such, it's a tragic performance. I mean, he is a disaster of a man. Like, he's like a shell of what he once was. And
exactly. And and he's the anti-Tony Soprano.
Exactly.
Like,
and that's what I love
film.
so much.
he's just like this scuzzy piece of shit that is just like pounding down drinks and like all he wants to do is just like bang hookers and like just muse to Brad Pitt about like how his wife's gonna leave him, and like Brad Pitt could give a fuck.
He has no intention of doing the work. He knows that he's never going to be able to do it, and it's wonderful how it all plays out.
Right, so like essentially, like in a nutshell, that's what that film's about, and it's like Brad Pitt's the fixer and has to fix these problems, and he just comes across like these different obstacles and stuff. It's truly remarkable, and aside from this film having cut-ins and sometimes voiceover, but what's prominent in the film is campaign speeches and rhetoric about the economy from like then presidential candidate Obama and sitting President George Bush about how like this is just a calamity and it's a hardship on like the working class of America. And a lot of times in the film when that shows up, it's like when the card game's being robbed by like Ben Mendelsohn and Scoot McNairy, and it's like the hardship of the working class while like these two guys are just like taking all these thugs' money and stuff. It's just fascinating, and that's kind of like the obtuse view of the movie, and I know we've spoken about this before, but I looked at like the film in this like kind of weird Freudian kaleidoscope, and I think probably around the time that this came out is when I was like reading a lot of like Freud stuff and a lot of his like scholarly writing, and the way I looked at the film is like through like the id, ego, and superego, where it's like broken down into these three parts that kind of are all floating together, with like Richard Jenkins being the superego, where he's so worried about society and morals and how it's going to impact the bigger picture of things.
And how people will think, and what people will think.
Right, exactly. He's worried about the ramifications of the actions of the ego, which is Brad Pitt, where Brad Pitt is just clear cut. It's black and white. It's like, we know that Ray Liotta didn't knock off his card game again, but we need to set an example, and he needs to go. I don't care what people are going to think about this, about, oh, poor Marky, everybody liked Marky. It's just like, a clear-cut, it's a clear-cut decision. It's calculated and it's cold, and per what Brad Pitt's viewpoint is, it's what needs to get done without having to worry about what Richard Jenkins is worried about. And then we have the id, that's just like James Gandolfini, who's just this fucking, dude, he's just so beautifully tragic in the movie. And I'm sure his death, which is tragic and awful, because I can't imagine, it still shocks me today that there's like no more James Gandolfini, especially since I rewatched The Sopranos. But anyway, you have James Gandolfini that all he gives a shit about is drinking and banging hookers and just bitching about his problems. And he could give a fuck. Right, and he could give a fuck less about anything. Like, the easiest way for me to describe it is Richard Jenkins gives too many fucks. Brad Pitt doesn't give any fucks whatsoever. And then you have James Gandolfini, who gives less than 0 fucks. Like, he's so far completely gone and removed from everything that he just doesn't care. And he could give a shit about anything in the movie, you know what I mean? It's like Brad Pitt's trying to fix the problem per Richard Jenkins, and then you have Gandolfini, who just doesn't care. He's just floating. He's just floating in the abyss of himself.
And if
like who he once was.
Yeah, and if what you're describing sounds like a very, happy-go-lucky movie, this movie is wonderfully mean. And I say that in all the best sense of the phrase. It revels in telling a story about assholes. And you don't get a lot of movies these days. There's a distinct 70s vibe to this film, which you just have to love.
Without a doubt, it's like the anti-establishment film of like
and you
what
love
the 70s is so well known for.
And that's I think the fun thing, the astute thing that Andrew Dominik did. He took material. We've seen movies about a card game that gets knocked off and a guy that comes into town, a hit. We've seen these movies before. You haven't seen a film like this filtered through the political prism that he did and to say nothing of the immense style that, he brought to the table. But between Greg I don't know how to pronounce his name, if it's Greg or Greg Fraser, if you want to just be impressed, go to the IMDb, type his name in, and look at the movies that man has been responsible for shooting over the last couple of years. The work that he did in Killing Them Softly is just eye-catching beyond all belief. I love the sequence when they rob the card game, and I don't know how, I still marvel how that cameraman is running backwards through the alley. Right? And the sound, the use of sound, the water creaking through those pipes. I love little bits in films like that where they really place you in the moment. They put you there. They make you feel, the hot or the cold in the air, or they I know. Put you in the moment, and that's what I loved about this film, is that you felt greasy while watching it. When you watch them shoot up in that ridiculous scene with the Velvet Underground playing in the background, right. It's just he takes a scene that you've seen before, right? People getting high, and you haven't seen it done that way. and without
a doubt.
And what makes that scene so lovely is that the conversation that they're having is so fucking integral to the plot, and they're doing it while they're completely toast on H. The fact that this movie got made at all is it's a reason to celebrate if you like these kind of hard-bitten films. And I got to give a shout out to the lady, in my opinion, the lady who is making movies interesting of late. And that's the producer, Megan Ellison. She's the daughter of Larry Ellison, the billionaire, and she's basically taken, trust fund money or inheritance, whatever, daddy's money, and she's put it to use producing Zero Dark 30, The Master, Spring Breakers, Lawless, Killing Them Softly, The Grandmaster, Her, American Hustle, Foxcatcher, and she's going to be doing the new Todd Solondz film and the new Richard Linklater. So she doesn't know anything about quality. She's clearly here to kill cinema for all of us. And honestly, I just have to say, between her and the people at a different company, A24, they're the most exciting people right now in movies, and getting movies that I want to see get made, and making them interesting, and Killing Them Softly falls right in line. So, and I have to say, your take on it through a Freudian lens is just something I never would have thought, wouldn't have even ever dreamed of contemplating. So I have to say it struck me as awesome to read something like that, because you're totally right. I mean, it falls so into line, and it's yet another way that you can read this film. Anytime you have a movie that can be read on multiple levels, you got something at least worth watching a couple times. And I feel like this movie's this is a once a year type visit for me.
Oh, I think, since we decided that this was going to be our first film to talk about on our podcast, I've probably watched it like 5 times, actually sitting down and watching it. And I'm not on my phone, or I'm not on my laptop, surfing the internet. I'm just watching it. And each time I watch it, I'm just so engrossed in it, because what really gets me hard is, details, and I absolutely love details, and this film is nothing but detail.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's insane how good this is. And I mean, like you touched on earlier, this is a hard film to watch for a lot of people.
Yeah, the violence in this movie is unflinching. The beatdown with Ray Liotta is one of the, and I've watched a lot of movies, I know you have watched a lot of movies with a lot of violence. Andrew Dominik does do some stylish stuff with violence, in particular the bit in the car, which, resembles some sort of I don't know, an art installation exhibit. I mean, for God's sake, with how stylish it is. When he wants to show someone getting their ass handed to them in this film, he does so with force and with a sense of immediacy that you don't often find in movies. And again, through the use of sound, through the use of editing, brilliant use of editing. This is, like you said, it's a nasty movie to watch at times.
Well, without a doubt. And to wrap up the Killing Them Softly segment, we could talk about this film for ever.
Oh, of course.
But it is on Netflix Instant, so if you guys haven't seen it or want to rewatch it again, you can check it out on Netflix. Just don't watch it with your significant other or anyone who, isn't really into dark, gritty,
Yeah, you have to want to watch
forcefully violent movies.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
You have to want to watch a movie about nasty people. There's nobody to root for in this movie. You sort of just have to say, okay, who's less bad?
Exactly. Just take me. That's pretty much it. It's like it. All right. So our next segment is we are going to do top 5 performances of 2 actors we really enjoy. Those being William Hurt and Glenn Close. William Hurt's one of my all-time favorite actors, and this was incredibly hard for me to put a list together because, like, I've seen his back catalog of films, I've seen his shitty films. It's, and I mean, the guy is just incredibly solid in, like, everything. I mean, he just brings it in everything, and he's just such an interesting person. So,
very versatile.
Anyway, right, without any further blowing of William Hurt, these are going to be my top 5 William Hurt performances. Number 1 being Kiss of the Spider-Woman, 2, A History of Violence, 3, Big Chill, 4, Body Heat, and then 5 was hard, but I had to go with Altered States, and I want to give an honorable mention to, like, Broadcast News and Children of a Lesser God and The King, and I could name 10 other movies, but that's my top 10, and I sat on it or top 5, and I sat on it long and hard. And Absolutely. That's mine.
That is a very solid top 5, and you're going to hear some of those repeated in a second. Yeah, I mean, for me, William Hurt has always been an actor that, I came of age in the 80s, and he was sort of, I would say, at his peak of his popularity as a leading box office draw in the 80s. So, my experiences with him were sort of, secondhand when I started getting into films, really intensely in the mid-90s. But for me, William Hurt, from what I've seen, easily my favorite performance that I've seen of him would be in Body Heat, which I just actually had the opportunity to rewatch last night. I had seen it once a while back, and in preparation of us doing this, I just love him in Body Heat. He just plays the patsy so well, and you believe him when he's gonna turn on a moment and change his whole philosophy as a person because of his relationship with Kathleen Turner. Just love it. So for me, Body Heat, number 1. Number 2, Altered States. It's just a totally insane performance. And if I'm not mistaken, his big screen debut, I believe that he had done television work. I could be wrong. There might have been something before Altered States.
No, you're right. It's Altered States.
Just an absolutely insane first performance, just leaving it all out. History of Violence, number 3. After Viggo Mortensen kills that movie, how does it get any better? Well, you have William Hurt in the last, 15 minutes, and he was nominated for Academy Award, if I'm not mistaken. And
yeah, man, everything builds to William Hurt in that movie. Everything that Viggo Mortensen goes through, all the shit with Ed Harris, and then in the last 20 minutes, he goes to see William Hurt, and William Hurt puts on one of the best performances I have ever seen.
Honestly, it is fucking incredible, and the way it's just the way he says "broheem" throughout the whole sequence. You just love it, and the cold. There's one particular shot, and it's also due to Cronenberg and his style. There's this cold, dead look in his eyes in one shot towards the end. It's right before he has his henchmen start to, try to kill, Viggo. I'm not sure if you know the shot I'm talking about, but there is a cold, blank stare in his eyes. And it just
before he swivels around in his chair. It's just when you could do one thing, I guess. You could die.
It just gets to me. So, that was my number 3. Number 4, Broadcast News. Very much enjoyed that. Just a fun movie, a really solid performance, a movie star performance, if you will, which you got to say he did well at. And number 5, I'm going to go with 2. I'm going to go obviously with The Big Chill, another great performance. More work with Larry Kasdan. Which, you have to say when people, work multiple times, they develop a rapport. Clearly they had something going there in the early 80s. But I'm going to sort of tie number 5 with The Big Chill and with Dark City. And
yes.
I know that he doesn't have a very big role in Dark City, but the way that he infused, some humor in an otherwise very dark, both visually and thematic movie. He brought some humor, but he just fit perfectly as this gumshoe and I've always loved Dark City because it just so cleverly blended science fiction and noir in a way that, few films, successfully do. He just brought this great panache to this otherwise kind of throwaway detective role. Isn't his name like Bumstead or something great like that? Or
it's something like 1950s, like Pulp Fiction.
Yes, you'd love it.
And I love his introduction shot where the camera creeps in from behind him and he's just like playing his accordion. And it's just like so interesting, and it's so unique because it's William Hurt, and he just has this facet for playing like unique characters and stuff like that. And he just brings a lot of prowess to like each performance that he does.
It's the versatility that you got to respect. So,
all right. So reflecting over your top 5, I actually just like wrote them down, and I mean like Kiss of the Spider Woman isn't on there, and like I was just like, what?
Yeah. Well, I will not lie. I have next to, and it happens, I have next to no mature recollection of that film. I do own it. I know. I do own it. In fact, I won a copy of it from a guy's blog like 6 years ago. I've got to watch it. Shame on me. I know. Flog me in the street. I do need to see it again. I couldn't put it on the list without accurately being able to discuss it. So
I remember like seeing that film for the first time. I was in college, and I rented it on VHS from the library because it wasn't on DVD at the time, and it didn't get a DVD Blu-ray release until like well into when DVDs were out and prominent, and VHS was like dead and buried.
Yep.
I mean, you want to talk about like versatility? The fact that like the leading man of the 80s, that's just like this totally handsome guy that was, had so much star power. The fact that he plays like a gay guy in a prison in like South America. I mean, and it's what he won his Oscar for. And then of course, like he won that. And then the next year he was nominated for Children of a Lesser God. And the year after that, Broadcast News. So, I mean, he was like the king of the 80s.
Absolutely.
But
I got to see it. I have to see it again. Again, I wouldn't have been able to competently discuss it without watching it again. It's something that I saw a long time ago. I didn't appreciate it. I wasn't, a movie guy yet, and I know I'll put it on my list to see for sure sooner than later.
I mean, just to like touch back on it again, I'm not shaming you for it or anything.
No,
but
shame
I
me.
mean,
I should be shamed.
You really should be shamed bad. But anyway, like, I mean, and he's just like overt and flamboyant. I mean, you want to talk about like panache? It's just incredible to me that it's incredible to me that he would risk his career where he comes off of Body Heat and The Big Chill and stuff like that, and he would play this role. I mean, it's incredible. And I mean, it was before, not to say that like gay characters are in vogue. Well, they definitely are now. There's always like the staple gay character in a lot of stuff now. But I mean, back in the 80s, I mean, you're talking like the AIDS outbreak. Yep. And stuff like that, and
a bold move for someone who had clearly made themselves a sex symbol, and who had gotten some acclaim for being, as you said, a movie star. So absolutely right. And you have to appreciate when people want to take chances and expand themselves, as an actor, as a performer.
Right.
So why don't we get into Glenn Close, another actor who peaked in the 80s, if you will, is still working, still doing, good work. I'll throw out my top 5. My top number 1, and it's maybe going to be controversial because it doesn't necessarily land in the realm of film, but for me, the best thing that Glenn Close has ever done was her arc on The Shield. And so I'm throwing it in there. I know it's TV, but The Shield to me is as good as almost any cop film ever made. I was obsessed with The Shield. I watched every episode. When she came onto that show, it was at a creative juncture for the show. The show is transitioning from one major plot line to another. She brought such a force and such a command to that show. It honestly, it grabbed me by the balls every time I watched the show, and I was just like, wow, like I was just not expecting her to do that sort of work. So my number one
as the new captain of the barn
is awesome. So my number one is the cumulative work on the Shield. Number two, I'm going to go with Fatal Attraction because it's iconic and because I've seen it a lot and because it's very much in my memory and because she was pretty wild and crazy in that movie. Number three for me is going to be Dangerous Liaison, Stephen Frears movie, a film that I have watched a bunch of times. I think it's a very, very, very good movie. Just great period, detail, great performances, great direction. And, I think Christopher Hampton wrote the screenplay. I remember it being very, very literate, and another very solid performance. Next one I'm going to go with is going to be kind of silly, but sorry, I loved her. I loved her in Mars Attacks.
I almost put that on my top 5. Okay. So I'm so glad you did.
Mars Attacks for me was a pisser when I saw it in the theater. It's still a pisser today. Everybody in that movie was clearly having a lot of fun, herself included. She's wonderful in it. And number 5, I'm going to go with The Paper because she brought the same sort, and a movie that I think is sort of like, I've always liked Ron Howard when he's R-rated. The Paper, Ransom, The Missing. I'm trying to think about Rush. When Ron Howard goes R-rated, the results Backdraft. The results are typically very, very good to excellent. The Paper, I feel, is sort of underrated. I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember her performance being in the same sort of level as The Shield, very commanding, very forthright, very disciplined. So I got to go back and actually watch that one again, but I do remember it pretty well, and I really did enjoy it there. What is your top 5 for Glenn Close?
All right, my top 5. Ours is actually different this time, for the most part. My first one's Fatal Attraction, of course, and I mean, you said what needs to be said about that movie. I've probably seen that movie. I don't even know how many times. I own it on Blu-ray. I absolutely love it, and she's just terrifying as fuck in that movie.
Yeah,
she's so good because she starts out as like this like sweet woman where you're like, yeah, all right, I'd cheat on my wife for Glenn Close, and then she just, you know what I mean? And then she just turns into like this fucking.
The woman,
like dude, it's horrifying.
The woman that you never want to see, that you can't see, you don't see coming, and that you're afraid to ever see coming. So,
God. All right. So my number 2 is not The Shield, and I did think about putting that on, but it's what springboarded her, or The Shield springboarded her into this, and that's Damages, and that's the show she had on FX for 5 seasons, and then it went to like Dish Network as an exclusive. That was before Netflix started doing that. But the Damages, which coincidentally enough, William Hurt had an arc in the 2nd season as like her former lover, and that was very good to see the two of them back together again since like The Big Chill. But Damages to me is one of the darkest and grittiest shows. I mean, it falls in line with The Shield. I mean, it was like FX's like next big like dark gritty TV show, and FX is very good at doing that.
Yes, I agree. And, I saw the first 2 seasons of that show. I did not finish it.
I mean, that's the best female performance I've ever seen on television, bar none, is Glenn Close. I mean, she is just like tough as fucking nails in that show. All right, then my number 3 is The Big Chill. My number 4, which I think is what she was nominated, that's what garnered her first nomination. She was also nominated for Fatal Attraction. Dangerous Liaisons, too, I want to say.
I think so.
But anyway, okay, so my number 3 is Big Chill. My number 4 was The Jagged Edge with Jeff.
That's a good one.
And my mom told me to watch that. And it was like on Netflix Instant, and she's like, you'll love that movie. And I'd like never heard of it. And I watched it.
Joe Esterhazy write that?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, I like that movie. Who directed that movie?
I don't know who directed that.
It was a good one.
But like Robert Loge is in it. I mean, it has like this nice little cast to it. It's a very good movie. And then my 5th one is In the Gloaming, and that was an HBO movie.
Yes.
Came out in the late 90s with her and David Strathairn, where they had a son who was dying of AIDS, and he was gay. And it was the guy from what's the Robin Williams? Dead Poets Society. I can never remember his name. It's like the 3-part name.
Yep.
And then Whoopi Goldberg plays like the nurse that's taking care of him, and David Strathairn like has no idea his son was gay, and he's like coming to terms with it. But I mean, like Glenn Close just like brings the house down in that movie, and she just is like the greatest woman ever, and like the epitome of like a loving mother. And it's just like she's just so good in it, man.
Yeah,
I haven't.
I think I saw it way back in the day when it was on. It was like you said, it was an HBO, and I remember.
Right.
Was it 90? What year was it? 90.
Probably like 99 or like
yeah,
90. Maybe it was earlier than that actually.
I was thinking maybe like 93, 94, 90, but whenever it was, I do remember it fairly well. Just really quick, Jagged Edge was directed by Richard Marquand, also known as the man who brought us the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi. So for that, I will always. I mean, for that I will always be fond. So.
Exactly.
All right, so why don't you? I know that you are a big collectible guy.
Dude, bad.
So what have you picked up of late that you are fond of?
Like I collect all sorts of shit. My biggest thing that I got recently was like Escape from New York just came out on Blu-ray from the Shout Factory, and they gave it a great transfer. It's a 2K transfer, and it looks amazing on my 4K TV because it's gritty and dirty and everything.
I can't wait to see it.
The kicker with it was when you pre-order certain titles from the Shout Factory, they will send you get it 2 weeks early, as opposed to buying it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and they'll give you a poster that's like an 18 by 22, and they fold it, which I love. I love folded posters as opposed to rolled. It just looks cooler, but I got an 18 by 24 Escape from New York poster, and it's like up on my wall. I went out and I bought a frame for it this weekend, and I took a picture of it and sent it to Nick, and I can post it on our website, which and the Facebook page, whatever. So that was it. But to actually get into collectibles, there's a company, NECA, that makes very cool, they're action figures, but they're catered for adults because they've done like a Predator line, and they've made like, 20 Predators. There's a small section at like Toys R Us for NECA. And they did like Planet of the Apes, and they do like Freddy, Jason, Hannibal Lecter, all sorts of stuff. They usually do Tarantino movies, but they have a new line that are they're 8-bit action figures, and 8-bit meaning the box and the action figure itself are designed to look like the original Nintendo video game. So the one that I originally bought was the Michael Keaton Batman from like the 89 film and from the Nintendo game. And the sculpt is great. It looks like Michael Keaton, like the jaw. It's amazing. And it's colored, and it's like blue and purple and like a little yellow. It's like what it looked like in like the Nintendo game. But what's in stores right now is they did a Rocky, and it's from Rocky 4, and the figure itself, they're super posable. The figure itself comes with like the American flag like draped around them, like like the poster for Rocky 4 or whatever. And they did a Rambo 2 figure. So like when you actually look at the figure, they're both colored to look like they're from a video game, an 8-bit video game, which is very cool. And there's so many. I could go on for so much longer.
You'll have to post pictures on the on the Facebook page.
I will definitely post pictures so you guys know what I'm talking about. But they do hold their value. So if you're going to open it up, buy doubles, because that's what I do sometimes. So yeah, so that's like with the collectibles. And also, I'm sure most people are familiar who are going to listen to this with Mondo. And
yes, I just got my Mondo in the mail, and it's at the framer. I got the Badlands poster, which I can't wait to see in the frame. So,
right, they're supposed to be doing all the Malick films,
which I know I won't. I couldn't believe that those posters sell out like in 38 seconds or something like that. So I still can't believe that I was able to get one of the Badlands ones. I know that there's going to be one of these that I'm not going to be able to snag, and I'm going to lose it. But I would love to get all of them, even though that I have no room anywhere to put all of my stuff. But that's a story.
I know. I skipped out on the Badlands. I remember I Facebook messaged it to you like right away because I knew you were the Malick guy, and I think that's when we first actually started to like. Yeah,
I'll be really
throw it up.
Yeah, I'll be really all over Mondo when those Malicks are released. Terrence Malick to me is he's more or less God.
No, without a doubt. I'm not going to argue with you there whatsoever.
What have you picked up? Any besides getting your Escape from New York on Blu-ray 2 weeks early? Mine is a regular release because I ordered it with a bunch of other stuff from Amazon, some of which showed up today. But anything else you've picked up on Blu-ray?
Yeah, I got like a Shout Factory coupon that was like spend $80, get free shipping, and 20% off your purchase. So I was like, all right, well, I'm definitely going to get Escape from New York because I want that fucking poster. Because it's just, I'm going to post a picture of it on like our Facebook page because it's just that. Also, like Escape from New York's like one of my favorite films. So it's like
I can't wait to revisit it. As I mentioned to you,
that's why I had to.
Yeah,
I had to get it. So with the Shout Factory bundle, I also got Fear City, which is Abel Ferrara's second film, which is like this weird sort of like studio butchered film that's like incoherent, but it's like really dark and fucked up, like all of his other films. But at the same time, it's like kind of mainstream because like Melanie Griffith is in it, Tom Berenger, Billy D. Williams. It was like these people that had like credibility and clout in the 80s that like were actually like movie stars. Because like now people work with Abel Ferrara and it's cool because like they're like auteurs like Willem Dafoe and like Gerard Depardieu and Harvey Keitel, but like it's this weird sort of ballsy movie that I think is kind of like, you know, a good double feature would be like Taxi Driver and Fear City. That'd be a rough double feature, but I would like to talk about Fear City at some point. So
yeah, that'll be one for me to catch up with. I've seen a number of Abel Ferrara films. There's a number that I haven't, so I would say that I've probably seen about half of his work.
Yeah, he's one of my all-time favorites.
I do like his stuff for what I've seen. As you said, I mean, I don't know if he's ever not made a ballsy movie. I mean, every movie that he makes seems to have some sort of edge or some sort of distinct social or some sort of personal stamp that he's interested in putting on his films. So
right.
So yeah, that'll be one for me to catch up with.
And then along with that, I got The Sailor Who Fell to Grace with the Sea, which I have not seen, but Chris Christopherson's in it, and I love Chris Christopherson as a musician and an actor, and I know it's supposed to have some like really shocking ending, so I've always wanted to see that film. I picked that up.
What's it called again?
It's called The Sailor Who Fell to Grace with the Sea, and I think that title's so awesome.
Well, I mean, I've never heard of this, and I'm writing it down, and I love the title. It's The Sailor Who Fell to
Grace with the Sea.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it takes place in like England with like this widowed mom and her like little kid, and Chris Christopherson's like this American sailor that like comes into whatever the harbor town is and like strikes up a romance with the mom. It's supposed to be amazing, so I'm going to get to it. It's still sitting on my coffee table. And then the last film I picked up from the Shout Factory like super bundle was a pre-order, and I believe it comes out in June, and it's a 2-pack of Pope of Greenwich Village and Desperate Hours. So it's a Mickey Rourke 2-pack. I haven't seen the Pope of Greenwich Village in a long time, but I love young Mickey Rourke. I love old Mickey Rourke too, but I love Mickey Rourke, and I particularly love Eric Roberts, and that film is great. I mean, that's a good movie. And then Desperate Hours was the Michael Cimino remake of the old Humphrey Bogart film, and it's with Anthony Hopkins and Rourke and Mimi Rogers, and I mean it's not great by any means, but I do enjoy watching it, and I'd like to support Michael Cimino.
Yes,
I think he's a great filmmaker, and the guy just totally gets shit on all the time, but whatever.
We'll do a Cimino podcast for sure.
That would be perfect.
It'll be fun because I too have liked a lot of his work, and the disc that you just referenced there, I also have on pre-order, The Pope of Greenwich Village.
Yep.
And it was a Desperate Hours, you said.
Yeah.
I've got that
pre-ordered.
Yep.
The last thing I bought was Killing Them Softly. There was a steelbook at Target for $10, and I like Blu-ray steelbooks. So I was like, well, this is one of my favorite films, and it's a steelbook. It's nothing special. It doesn't have any special cover art or back design. I mean, it's pretty much just like a bare-bones steelbook. So, but I picked it up anyway because it's Killing Them Softly. So that's what I got recently. I know you have a whole stack of shit you just bought. So
yeah, I've been going crazy of late, which is always fun. I'm always looking for anything like the cheapies or the 2-for-1s and all that kind of stuff when they put the 2 movies on, the older ones. I want to give a shout out to The Immigrant, James Gray's movie, which just came out on Blu-ray. which got completely shafted by the Weinstein Company last summer. It took them almost a year to get the movie out on Blu-ray after they barely released it in theaters. It's an absolutely sensational movie. It should have been nominated last year for Best Picture. I can't understand how the Weinsteins just bailed on it. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm still scratching my head over it. So I really hope that people catch up with it. The Immigrant. Did you? I'm trying to remember if we've talked.
Yeah, I saw it. It was on Netflix Instant like a year ago. I loved it.
Yeah, just wonderful.
With everything you just said.
I also picked up The Stuntman, Richard Rush's film, which I actually had the opportunity to watch this weekend, and it was absolutely insane. Another guy we could probably do a whole hour on just talking about Richard Rush and his crazy movies. I was able to grab Most Violent Year, which I thought was just fantastic. I think J.C. Chandor is one of the best young filmmakers right now after All Is Lost and Margin Call and then Most Violent Year, 3 very different films. Just a great filmmaker. Was able to pick up two films on one DVD. Who'll Stop the Rain, a film I've always wanted to see, and then Rush with Jason Patric and Jennifer.
Nice,
Jason.
That's a good 2-pack.
Yeah, and it was like $7 or something. So and Rush I've seen once, and I can't wait to watch it again. I love the gritty cop genre. Jason Patric was also in Narc, which I still can't believe is not on Blu-ray, but that'll be another topic for another day. What movies aren't?
And I can't
on Blu-ray.
believe I can't believe Ray Liotta didn't get nominated for that film.
Yeah, they both should have been nominated. It should have gotten the awards notice that it did get buzz within the industry. That movie was essentially, I don't know, we'll get into this another time too, in depth if you want about Narc, but I don't know how much you know about the backstory about William Friedkin and Tom Cruise basically getting that movie seen by people and really sort of beating the drum for it. Tom Cruise would later go on to screw over Joe Carnahan on Mission Impossible, but that's another story. And what's one of the other last ones? Oh, and then one that I'm not familiar with because it was I took a recommendation from again Paul Rowlands, a guy who's always telling me about movies. I think I watch a lot. That guy knows what's going on with movies. I'm going to check out No Tears for the Dead, which sounds very exciting. Kind of an Asian action film in the way of The Raid, which I haven't seen yet. So I'm looking forward to No Tears for the Dead. I haven't seen The Raid. Both of those I've obviously seen. So that's about it for the moment. In terms of new acquisitions, and after a long weekend of watching movies, what are you supposed to do except start watching more? Towards the beginning of the week. So.
Right. All right. Well, that's pretty much it, I think, for our first podcast, which we were super excited to do this. We've been waiting 2 weeks to do it, and I'm so glad that we did it. And this is just so exciting, and I love it. And I just can't wait to do, I don't even know, as many more as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
So we'll have this published, and it'll be put up everywhere. So by the time you hear this, you've probably already listened to it. So I don't even know why I just said that. So next week, we are going to have our film of the week is going to be 7, right? Well, essentially how this works is I pick the topics of one week. Nick picks the topics for the next week. So go ahead, you take it since you're picking the topic next week.
Exactly. Rotate back and forth each week. You'll pick one, I'll pick one. Next week, we're going to go with Michael Mann's Heat.
Oh, awesome. For
our main film of topic of conversation. We might need to have a 5-hour podcast for that one.
I'm down with that.
But we're going to do Michael Mann's Heat. For the actor, we're going to do Mark Ruffalo. And for the actress, we're going to do Jessica Chastain.
Awesome.
And that's about it for now, I would say.
Yeah, I think we're good to go. So thank you to whoever's actually going to listen to this.
Absolutely. And thank you for everybody's support. Hope you guys enjoy, and we'll be doing it, as much as we can, because this is obviously something that we really enjoy, and we'll love to hear what people have to think and give us as many movie recommendations as you can, please.
Absolutely. All right. Awesome.